Have you guys ever finished a project, sent it over to the client, and then they tell you, we need to change the music? If that's ever happened to you, go ahead and hit that like button. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss out on future videos like this one. So today we're gonna be taking a look at the Slypod Pro. Now, I've actually have been using this for over 6 months, and there's a reason why I've kind of held off on making this video. I was a big fan of the original Slypod. The problem is that there was just too many quirks and things that didn't work properly, enough for me to not recommend that product. However, after reaching out to Moza and explaining to them all of the things that didn't work, the Pro version comes out, which literally fixes all of the complaints that I had with the original Slypod. Now, if you're not familiar with what a Slypod is, in a nutshell, it's basically like a monopod, but a motorized monopod that gives you the functionality of a slider, but also a jib, but also a monopod and a couple of other things. It tries to be a slider, which is not, but it also tries to be a jib, and it's not. But I feel that it does have a lot of good uses. And like I said, I've been using this now for over 6 months, and I'll explain how I've been using it and some of the interesting shots that you can get from it. So I'm gonna go ahead and retract this now, and you can see it's actually pretty fast. It's also a little bit loud. Now the microphone is placed up above, so you will hear it a little louder than normal, but this is kind of worst case scenario. So again, if you're not familiar with the original Slypod, I'm just gonna do a really quick overview so you guys can see all of the different functionality. So I have another one here. Moza did send out 2 of them. And you can see here from the original one, it's much thicker, still made out of carbon fiber, still very lightweight. And now it extends to 53 centimeters, which I believe is twice as long as the original Slypod. One thing that you'll notice here on the body is that it does have 2 Arca Swiss built-in plates, one located towards the top and another one towards the bottom, and you can use both for better stability. Now on the bottom here, you'll notice that there are 4 screws. You have 2 1/4 20 mounts and 2 3/4 20 mounts also from the top and bottom. So again, it's going to be very secure. Now towards the base of the Slypod Pro, there are 3 buttons. If you hold the power button down for about 3 seconds, it obviously powers on or off the unit. If you double tap, if it's in motion, it will stop. And then if you push it 3 times, it will retract to its original state. Now there's also 2 other buttons. One of them is a plus or minus, and that's obviously to extend or retract. And then there's 2 other ports. One of them is to connect directly to the camera if you're doing any time lapses, which I personally have not used. And then the other one is a USB Type-C port to power the whole entire unit. Now on the bottom here, it has really large legs, which you can actually remove. So if you twist this off, it has a 1/4 20 mount towards the bottom. And you can also use this as a traditional monopod. And I like that it has a locking quick release. So all you need to do is just push this up and it releases the ball part of it. So you can move it. And then if you want to lock it into place, you just lift this up. And then once you center it, it locks into place so that it doesn't accidentally fall, which obviously is an important thing if you have a camera that is pretty much rigged up. And that's pretty much like the exterior part of it. Let's go ahead and talk about the head, which has been redesigned. The head itself is really where the magic is. The first one just had way too many problems. It had this like clicky motion where you can only set it to specific points. This one is a fluid head and you can adjust it basically any direction. And this is what makes this product very interesting, because now if I want to get, let's say for example, a shot like this, where I have a couple of products on the table and I want to slide, normally on a traditional slider, you couldn't do this because there's tracks underneath. It just wouldn't work. Well, with this, I can actually put the camera, like I said, in basically any direction, and I can do several camera moves that I would normally not be able to do with just only a slider or a jib. In fact, I remember this particular shoot I had where I was filming the engine bay of a Ferrari. I had a very limited amount of time, and I also had to be very careful for obvious reasons. Now, if I were to do it in a traditional way, that means that I would need multiple people to help me rig something up to get this overhead shot that I needed for this engine bay. Well, I was able to do this all by myself, and from setup to actually shooting, it took me less than 2 minutes, which is something that, again, it would cost me more money because now I have to have somebody on set to help me and also more equipment that I would need to carry. I understand that that's a particular scenario, but this is what I mean about getting those specialty shots. Now, I talked about how this has physical controls. I like products that actually have physical controls and don't force you into an app. There's a lot of products out there where you're forced to use it only through an app, or sometimes they have their own controllers, but then you forget the batteries, and that's a whole different thing. So this has a plus and minus, and I'll kind of walk you through really quickly here. So if I wanted to do a sliding shot, so see quickly here, I can just set up. I'm just gonna do a normal traditional sliding shot. I can hold this down and it's gonna do maximum speed. Now, if I want to slow it down, I just push the negative button, push it down again, push it down again, push it down again, and one more time, and then that's the slowest that it goes. And it extends, like I said, 53 centimeters, which is pretty long. Now, I'm going to go ahead and retract it. Same thing. I'm going to slow it down. So full speed, and then slow it down, slow it down, slow it down. And then you can see here, this is the slowest movement it does on board. It will actually go slower when you use the app, which we'll get there in a second, but this is the slowest it will do it on board. And I'll be quiet here so you can see, or you can hear, or you can hear. It's very quiet. Like, you're not gonna interrupt anybody with this. It's actually quite nice. So those are the movements that you can do, obviously plus, minus. It works. If you need to get the shot, you don't wanna fire up the app, that works great. Let me go ahead and grab my phone and I'll show you what you can do with the application, which is obviously a lot more. So I went ahead and loaded the application to show you guys some of the cool things that you're able to do with the Slypod Pro. So front and center, you're greeted with your battery level. It's at 100%. Now, in my usage, the most I actually kept this on and used it was about 4 hours. And from what I remember, I still had about 85% battery life. Now, keep in mind, in those 4 hours, I didn't use it the whole entire time. There was times where it was in standby mode. It just basically was left for like 30, 45 minutes, and then I used it again. It's a tool. You're going to use it when the shot is required. It's not something that you're going to be using the whole entire time, because it's just made to get those specialty shots. So in terms of battery life, I've had great success. Like I said, I haven't used it for more than 4 hours, and when I did, it was about 85%. Now, there's different types of ways you can control it. The first one is, we'll go in here, it's called remote control. So there's basically a slider that goes from 0 to 520 millimeters. So I can use my finger to say, if I want to go here right in the middle and just let it go, it will automatically do that. Now, obviously it's loud. Now remember, I told you that it will actually go very slow. I can go here to speed, and it's actually already at 1. What I can do is I can hold down here where it says downwards, I can push that down, and I know it's moving very slow to the point where you probably don't see it. In fact, let me change the speed to like 3 so that you can actually see movement. It's moving very slowly. Let me go back to 1 so you can see. 1. I promise you that it's moving very, very slowly. So again, if I want to change that to, let's say, 26, hold this down, it will automatically, well, not automatically, I have to be pushing it down. Now, if you do want it to be automatic, then you go to the gear shift mode. The gear shift mode is where you just literally push upwards. So in this case, I have my speed set to 50, but what's gonna happen is it's going to ramp up to 50 and then it's going to slow down. So it's basically like it eases into 50 and then it eases out. In fact, let me go back to square 1 here. Let's start to 0 so you guys can see the whole movement. So I'm gonna go to gear shift mode. Now I'm going to leave it at 50 speed, and I'm gonna go ahead and push upwards. So it's starting off slow, it's ramping up. So 0, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, and then 40, 30, 20. So it basically does this. It's like a curve, like a big mountain. And then it slows down to 0. So a good way to ease in, ease out. Same thing if I push downwards, the same thing will happen. It will ramp up very gently, and then it will start to basically go up to 50 because that was my maximum speed. And then it will just ease out into the slide, which is cool. Now, the other method is acceleration mode. Now, the way acceleration mode is very similar to gear shift mode, but if I set it to 50, what's gonna happen is once it reaches 50, it will remain 50 until it hits the final destination. So again, it'll ease into 50, But once it hit 50, it's not going to ease out. It's just going to remain at 50. So again, these are just different stylistic shots that you can think about. Oh, I need it to do this. And there it is. It's at 50 right now. It's going to hold it until it hits the end. So it's going to stop abruptly. There. I mean, it'll still slowly ease out, but it won't do it gradually. So again, going down. I'm going to go ahead and push down here. So now it's going to start slow, go to 50, and then remain at 50 until it hits the very end of the Slypod. Okay, now there's other modes. For example, there's silent mode. What I think happens is it limits the motors to about 30%. So if I go back to remote control and then I just use, let's say I go to the very top, technically I could still hear it. It's not as loud. You guys will probably hear it a little bit more because the microphone is literally right here where the motors are. It is pretty silent, but I also did that at 100% and my 100 is like 30. So I believe silent mode just means that it limits the motors to about 30% throttle. Now there's a creative mode, like I mentioned. This is where you connect the camera to the Slypod Pro. Personally, I don't use it, but it looks very interesting because you're able to do different types of effects. Again, this is probably more for somebody that is doing time lapses. The other thing is linkage control. Now, linkage control allows you to really take this product and go to like the next level. This is where if you have a Moza Aircross 2, it allows you to connect it to this other side, and now you're able to use not only the slider part of it, but also the gimbal, giving you like a 5-axis motion. So using that, which I don't have that gimbal right now, will allow you to basically unlock this and do like way more functionality than just the monopod itself. Now you can only imagine if it can hold a gimbal and a camera on one side, it has the power to push that weight, and it definitely does. Horizontally, it can do 3.5 kilograms, so don't be fooled by the small FX3. It can hold much more than that, and if you're doing it vertically, it can actually push 6 kilograms, which is pretty much a pretty rigged up C500 Mark II. Now, as I mentioned, I have been using this for over 6 months, and I've waited to make sure that this is a product that I can personally use and also recommend. And like any other product, like gimbal, slider, or jib, I don't think that this is a product that you would use all the time. It's definitely one of those specialty products that it's just to get the shot. In fact, I've actually used the original Slypod not to hold the camera, but to actually smash 2 crackers together in a s'mores recreation video that I did. If you guys have not seen that video, I will leave it linked down below. So really, it's just to your imagination how you want to use your product and if it makes sense. But if you guys have any questions, leave me a comment down below. If you guys want to learn more about the Moza Slypod Pro, I'll leave links to the product down below in the description. My name is Armando. Thanks again for watching, and you will catch me in the next one. Adios.